Hi everybody, welcome back to the Menta Watches channel. Sorry for the hiatus. It's been a few weeks since we've released a video. I got sick, we did some traveling, but we're back now. Today's video is going to be another quick Q&A session, although I don't know how quick it'll be because we have a lot of questions. I put out a Ask Me Anything a few weeks ago and we got some questions, and also today on my Instagram stories I did a Q&A and I've been flooded with questions. So let's dive right into it. We'll start with the questions that I got a few weeks ago, and I'll pick out some good ones. Okay, first question. Daytona dials, replacement service, or replacement/service replacement dials, and the impact it has on the value of watches. So I guess what they're trying to ask is, does a service dial impact the value of a Daytona? I think it impacts the value of any watch, not just the Daytona. Obviously, having that original dial is going to make your watch be worth a lot more, as everybody wants watches in as original condition as possible. I think having a service dial, that being said, is much more preferable than having a damaged dial or a refinished dial or a relumed dial. But yeah, you should not be paying for a service dial watch as much as you should be for an original dial. Okay, next question. This one is very long. We're going to skip that for now. $5,000 Future Legends. Oof, that's a tough one. You know, I think a lot of the 90s Tritium Speedmasters and 70s and 80s also, they made a lot of them, but they're still 5K and under. And I think as the nice ones start becoming further and far between to find, you're going to see an increase in the price on those. I could be wrong. I think all of the $5,000 Rolex that was $5,000 is now more. So you're talking like your Explorer 2s, 16570, 16550, Explorer 1, 14270, stuff like that. If you're lucky enough to still find it for $5,000, I would buy it now. Like the Neo Vintage Sapphire Crystal with tritium dial stuff. They're just getting more and more popular and harder to find, so that would be my bet. But it's hard within the $5,000 vintage range to pick a winner. Okay, well, this is a funny question. I don't know how serious he is, but what are some good tactics for hiding watch purchases from my very observant wife? Well, I don't really have that problem anymore. Because I made it my job. So I used to always tell her, oh, well, I sold these two watches to pay for this one. And it usually was true. And that's actually kind of what fueled, you know, my ability to get into this business. I was doing so much buying and trading, and I kind of would sell two watches to pay for one, or, you know, trade up and try to keep the money factor being equal. But I think, you know, having a separate budget for watches is very key, being open and honest with your wife about it. You know, I know like what I do with cars, for example, nowadays is if I get a new car, I let her know that, you know, I paid the right money for it, that I'm going to be able to drive it for a year basically for free after I pay for my insurance because the value is going to stay the same, yada, yada, yada. So if you're able to show that you're not burning off too much money, you know, if you go buy a brand new Hublot at retail and then try to sell it a day later or a month later and lose 50%, then yeah, that sucks and she's going to be pissed. But if you're buying the right stuff that's generally holding its value or not losing a ton or even gaining some, I think the conversation is going to go a lot easier. But always remember, people, don't ever use your spouse as an excuse to back out on a watch. If you have to back out on a deal that you've agreed to, do not say, oh, sorry, my wife won't let me buy it or my husband won't let me buy it. And absolutely under no circumstance tell a dealer or a seller of a wristwatch that you have to check in with your spouse. It's just, pardon my French, a really bitch move, and it's something I wouldn't recommend anybody use. Okay. Moving on, great vintage beater watches. Man, that's tough. I would say a lot of the vintage Seiko are really cool beater watches because you still kind of get that vintage flair, but you're not breaking the bank, although some of them have gotten quite expensive. I really like those Speedmasters that I was just talking about, you know, in that $3,000 to $4,000 price point. Even cheaper than that. Oof. I mean, I hate to think of any vintage watch really as a beater because you kind of don't want to beat up the watch. Honestly, just buy something modern that's $1,000 or less if you want to go swimming with it. Ming watches and their demand on the secondary market. Well, I fielded this question before we made our last video on Ming, so I guess go back and watch my old video on the Ming controversy. If you want to hear me talk about Ming watches, the demand on the secondary market, it actually is pretty strong. A lot of their watches have been going for over retail. We've sold several on the site, and they sell relatively quickly with a good amount of demand on them. So yeah, I think they're pretty strong in the marketplace right now. Next question. This is a good one. Where do you look up pricing for vintage watches? And we've talked about this before. There's no really one place. It's very, very, very difficult. You have to kind of keep your finger on the trigger, so to speak, in looking in all different directions at all times, and it's a lot easier to follow when you're in my position doing it day in, day out, when my money's on the line and I have to make sure that what I'm buying is for the right price, and that I'm not overpaying for it. So it's easier said than done. There are good resources. You could look at Chrono24, for example, to kind of get a base, although usually your watch is not worth as much as it says on Chrono24 because people are asking crazy prices for them. There used to be a great pricing guideline called the Spec Sheet. The company was recently purchased by a friend of mine, and he's bringing it back to life with the help of some great people who are in the watch industry, so check it out. It's Spect, S-P-E-C-H-T, sheet. And I don't know when it's launching yet or when it's going to be available for people to sign up, but it will basically be a pricing guide that will give you more or less an idea of the market. But honestly, it's all about kind of doing your homework and asking other people. Sometimes when I'm not sure, I ask somebody else to get their opinion. And that's really it. It's a tricky process, and there's no simple answer to that question. Is a Hulk a good investment? Again, I don't like to look at watches as investments. I like to look at watches as objects that I love and I'm passionate about, and that if I buy, especially in personal collecting, if I buy and I enjoy it, that's already a bonus for me, and I've already, gained something out of it. Now, if the watch tends to appreciate over time, it's an added bonus, and it's worth more. But if you're looking to invest, call your stockbroker. If you're looking to park some money in something that you could wear and enjoy and hopefully appreciate, yeah, then you look towards a watch. But don't park your money in a watch with the strict intent of it appreciating. I think the Hulk, to answer the question, is more or less a steady option. The market hasn't really changed drastically over the past few years. It's gone up, but it's not a watch that I ever foresee crashing at some point. Markets go up, markets go down. I don't think it'll ever be like a sub $10,000 watch ever again. But is it a good investment? I don't know. I'm not really a fortune teller. Next question. Where do you see the market industry 5 years from now or 10 years from now? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a lot different than what we're looking at right now. The demand for watches right now is at an all-time high. There's so many more people entering the market, getting involved in watches in different capacities as a journalist, a collector, a dealer, an enthusiast, or making a TV show about it like Roman and Luxury Bazaar did. There's so much more interest, and even people that aren't into watches enjoy, for example, watching Roman's show. Jordan, who's sitting here, who works with me, his wife makes him wait to watch Roman's show without, so he doesn't watch it without her, and she doesn't care about watches at all. So I think in 5 to 10 years, the market's going to be healthy. The industry is going to be strong. It's not like Apple Watches came and destroyed everything like a lot of people were paranoid about when they came out, 6-7 years ago or whatever. There's still a huge demand and interest in mechanical timepieces, and I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. So I see only good things. Your worst customer? Oh, there's so many. Okay, next question. I know barn finds make collectors lose their minds, but my opinion, at what point is it just a beat-up watch rather than a piece you can wear as is? How do you evaluate whether you should refurbish? It's a very good question. Generally, obviously, I steer away from refurbishing a watch unless it really needs it. Like, for example, I've found new old stock barn find watches that I've just completely left alone, and they're not really wearable as watches. I mean, you can, but you need to be very careful, obviously, because, when a watch is so pristine and untouched and found, in this remote location, it's more of like a piece of art at that point. So you can use it as a watch, but it could also hurt the value if it's something that it's worth so much because of the untouched condition of it. I like to refurbish watches only really when they need it. So if a watch isn't running properly, I'll have it serviced. Somebody on Instagram actually asked me today, which was a good question, of at what point do you think it's good to recut or polish a case? And I think it's to a point where when it really needs it. So if a case has already been, in the vintage world, if it's already been over polished, like way too polished, then a good recut to make those factory chamfers, or mimic the appearance of factory chamfers is always a good thing. I'd rather it look good. If it's been lightly polished, and there's maybe still some original bevels or the case is thick, I leave it alone. I don't refurbish it. So yeah, at some point it's just a beat up old watch and you should get it fixed up if it's already been, touched before. When I say touched, I mean either polished or worked on or the band's been changed. Then yeah, get it cleaned up and maybe try to revert it back to as original as possible. But if the watch is in pristine condition, just leave it alone, even if it's dried out and not running. Just kind of keep it as a work of art. I'm getting a phone call. Let's send it to voicemail. Okay, this guy asked me specifically to answer this question, and I think it's going to disappoint when I give him the answer because he followed up on Instagram to ask about it. Do you think the Turnograph 5-digit is superior to the standard Datejust or just another Datejust? It's just another Datejust. Sorry to burst your bubble. I think it's cool that it has a rotating bezel and it's like a little bit different. And there's a little bit of like pilot history, I guess, in there. But I think it's just another Datejust for me. There's certainly cool variants of it. There are cool two-tone variants or cool black dial variants of it. But I don't see a huge premium over a 5-digit Turnograph versus a standard Datejust, if that's what you're getting at. Okay, and I guess we'll field a couple. I'll look through a couple of the questions that I got on Instagram because I'm sure we're already running well over 10 minutes here, and you guys have things to do. And I'll pick out a couple of the good ones. Okay, this I thought was a really good one. Tips on being a successful dealer, and then he wrote like yourself, but we'll just say tips on being a successful dealer. And I had put like 3-point answer to that question. Number one, work very hard, and don't take anything for granted. I think a lot of people, especially because of the market conditions of the past few years, think that this job, watch dealing, is just an easy way to make a quick buck because you could buy a watch, for example, at Rolex for $8,000 and sell it immediately for $15,000. And they're like, holy shit, I just made $7,000 selling this watch in a day. All these deals are going to be like that. And the simple truth is that's not how it is at all. A lot of dealers work on very limited margins, and especially in the modern world, the guys who are very successful at it sell high volume for low margin, and it's stressful, and it's time consuming, and it's risky. Sometimes a watch may not be correct, or you might not be able to have recourse getting your money back, whatever the case may be. It's not just an easy, quick, get-rich scheme. The people who are very successful at it work very, very hard night and day. I'm on my phone literally 24/7. I wake up every day, and before I can even get out of bed, for 30 to 45 minutes, I'm laying in bed answering emails, texts, Instagram messages, WhatsApp messages, Facebook messages, dealing with this shipping issue or that nightmare. It's not as easy as people think. Just because you sold a watch once and made a little bit of money, don't expect every deal to go that way. Point number 2 that I made was obviously, most importantly, I think, be honest and be fair with people. Especially in the vintage world and even the modern world, there's a lot of shady shortcuts you can take to make a quick buck, and it's not, ethically the right thing to do, and it's not really necessary. You should always stand behind your watches. You don't need to take those shortcuts. There's always a watch you can make money off of without having to do that. And in the long run, it's only going to benefit you to maintain a great reputation and, be able to sleep at night. And, I think if you're honest and fair with people, and you're fair in your pricing, you're fair in your terms, the way you treat people with respect, they're going to come back to you, and it's going to generate more business. And that's what's helped me in my personal business. And I think it, is good advice for anybody to take, and not just watch dealing, I think with any industry. And the third and final point that I made was, don't be afraid to take shots. I remember several years ago, I had bought a watch for $20,000 that a friend of mine had told me, oh, you could sell it for $30,000. It's a really rare watch. And I didn't know the watch very well. I had a bad gut feeling about it, but I trusted this guy, good friend of mine, and he's usually right to his benefit, to his credit. This watch was not worth $20,000. And I could not sell it. I put it in an auction, a major auction house, and it failed to sell. And I was really upset because I was like, well, now what do? I've had this watch already going on 6 months. Now it just passed in an auction house and it's kind of dead. And I remember sitting with an older, wiser dealer than myself, Mr. Matthew Bain, and he said to me, listen, don't be upset. If you're not taking shots in this business, buying watches, losing money, and making mistakes, you're not really in the game, and he's absolutely correct. You're gonna sometimes have to take risks, and they might not always pan out if you try to play the safe route every time. And like I said in my Instagram written response, a lot of dealers these days, they want to take a picture of a watch at a show and try to pre-sell it to somebody without laying out their own money and capital because they're scared of stocking the watch or losing money on it, and they don't want to take a risk. And that's okay, but I think that's a really soft approach to the business, and you're never going to be super successful if you do that. You have to be willing to take a gamble and not be afraid to make a mistake and lose some money every once in a while. As long as your gains outstrip your losses, you should be fine at the end of the day. And like I also said at the end of that written response is, don't be afraid to just let go of stale inventory. Sometimes I'll have a watch that I thought was worth more than it really is. The market didn't agree with me, and I paid too much for it, and it's just sitting on my site collecting dust. So I'll let it go at a loss to at a loss to myself and my business, and for less than I paid for it. So I think it's just working hard, being honest, and putting yourself out there is a great way to get started and move yourself forward in this business. Let's do one more question. I know I've been rambling. This is a funny one, and I guess I'll just use that as an ending question, not really watch related. Why is your business called Menta Watches? Well, when I was deciding on names for my business, a good buddy of mine proposed that I use the name Menta Watches, and his explanation was, well, Menta means mint in Italian, like mint condition. I'm like, wow, that's actually really cool. It sounds good. I could use the green color. Mint condition. I'm trying to only offer mint condition watches. Let's go with it. So I chose that name. About a year later, I'd already moved into a new office. An Italian dealer comes to my office, and he asked me the same question: why'd you choose Menta watches? And I said, well, you're Italian, you understand. Menta means mint, like mint condition watches. He says, no, my friend. Menta means mint like the flavor, like menthol. It doesn't mean mint like mint condition. So that was the first time I'd learned about that. I'm not an Italian speaker natively. I called up my friend who goes by the name of Isaac, and I said, Isaac, how did you figure out that Menta means mint? He's like, oh, I Google translated it. So we were already a little too far in the game for me to have changed the name, and I kind of like it, and I think the story is great, so I never changed it, and that's how we arrived at Menta Watches. So I guess that is it. We will cap it. There's a ton of more questions, but we'll save them for next time. If you have any other questions, you could comment below, send a message through the website, through Instagram, on YouTube, directly here. Thanks for watching. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all the generic bullshit. And that's it. Thanks, guys. Bye.